This is one of the most terrifying videos ever created. And it is all because of what this thing is. It's called the Sky Serpent of the Himalayas. And for over 30 years, people have been claiming that they've seen it fly across the mountains in the middle of the night. I wanted to know if there was any truth to these stories, so I traveled to the Himalayas to look for it. This is the story of my search for the Sky Serpent. In order to make sense of what we're looking for, we need to go back a few hundred years and look at some old journal entries from monks who lived here. Back then, this region was full of monasteries and religious hermitages, and the monks who lived there saw this beast multiple times and drew pictures of it. They wrote that it was hundreds of feet long, looked like a giant snake or dragon, and flew around the valley every night. They also described how its eyes glowed red in the darkness, which is why I thought it would be a good idea to include that detail in the animation. I started by creating a title card that looks like an old leather book. Then I made a sequence that shows our protagonist, the massive serpent, flying around the mountains. The problem is, it doesn't really show what time of day it is, or the fact that it is flying through a thick fog. So I added some mist, adjusted the colors to make it darker, and included some light particles to represent the moonlight. Then we cut to the next page of the book and see the dragon silhouetted against the moon. This is where I added some subtle lighting effects to the smoke, adjusted the fog density, and played around with some color grading. I also made the ground beneath him glow a faint red, just like the eyes of the beast. Then we cut to a scene of villagers looking up in terror at the giant serpent. But I didn't want them to look like modern humans. I wanted them to look more primitive. So I gave them darker skin tones, long black hair, and loincloths instead of pants. And then we cut to another drawing in the journal showing the sky serpent flying away into a cloud formation. So I recreated that using Maya's cloud generator. I started by creating a simple sphere. Then I used the sculpt mode to add some surface detail. After that, I projected a texture onto the sphere and painted it to look more like a cloud. Then I duplicated the sphere and animated it along a path, making it spin and change sizes as it moved. Finally, I added a lot of random noise to the sphere using Maya's noise modifier and changed the render settings to create the wispy look. So far, I had a lot of cool footage, but I needed to find a way to bring it all together. That's when I remembered there was a short film called The Man Who Planted Trees. It's a silent black and white movie about a shepherd who plants trees and then cuts to a shot of the valley he is standing in, which has now become a lush green forest filled with birds and animals. So I got the idea to do something similar using the journal entries as narration. I found an old weather-beaten journal on Amazon and bought it because I liked the cover art. Then I went through the motions of recreating the Sky Serpent, using the drawings in the journal as reference. After that, I added a layer that explains what's happening in each scene, using text. I tried to match the style of the writing to the illustrations by adding shadows and textures. But after finishing the animations, I realized that the journal pages were too busy and distracting. So I took an entirely new approach. I recorded myself reading the journal entries and put my face on top of a digitally painted version of the journal. Then I added some particle effects to simulate falling snow and set the video to play on a loop. But even though the narrator was working well, the animation still felt out of place. That's when I had the idea to make it feel more mysterious by including a narrator. But there was a problem. I didn't know what to say, so I ended up interviewing myself and recorded 3 different versions of the same questions. Then, I edited them together and added some audio effects like reverb and delay to make my voice sound deeper and more ominous. The last thing I did was add some atmospheric perspective to the scene. Atmospheric perspective is a technique where objects in the distance appear smaller and have a bluish tint. It's a common technique in landscape paintings, and I think it helps sell the scene. And here's the finished video. After living among the Sherpa people in the Himalayas for several weeks, I can tell you firsthand that there are no giant serpents living in the mountains. There are, however, many goats. A while back, I asked my followers on social media if they believed in the Sky Serpent. Some people said yes, and others said no. But what surprised me the most were the number of people who said they had seen it for themselves. One person wrote, "I am a local guide here in Pokhara, and I have seen the rod with my own eyes twice." Another person wrote, "I am a local tour guide, and I have seen it twice. Once at 4 a.m. near Manaslu, and once at 6 p.m. near Dar." And a third person wrote, "I saw this huge black snake climbing up a mountain with my own eyes in August 2018 in the Mustang District. To be honest, I didn't know what to believe, so I decided to follow up and see if I could find any of them. But before I could do that, my friend Samir sent me a message. He's a writer and researcher who's been studying the Sky Serpent for the past 30 years. According to Samir, the first written record of the Sky Serpent dates back to 1812. In the book, a British officer describes seeing a giant snake fly across the Langtang Valley. Since then, there have been dozens of eyewitness accounts, but only 2 verified photographs. One of the photos was taken in 1974 by a Canadian climber named Alan Arnett. He was standing on the Annapurna Circuit when he saw a huge serpent slither across the valley. But even though the photo looks genuine, Alan admits that he didn't actually see the entire animal. Instead, he saw a dark shape moving in the distance and assumed it was a large lizard. The other photo was taken in 2005 by a biologist named Hari Shah. He was conducting research in the Rolling Valley when he saw a large snake floating in the sky. He followed it for hours, until it disappeared behind a mountain. However, there is some doubt about the legitimacy of this photo because Hari works for a government agency that studies paranormal activity in Nepal. I'm not sure what to believe either. On one hand, it's hard to imagine a creature like this going unnoticed by modern society. On the other hand, we have dozens of eyewitness accounts and 2 photographs to consider. What do you think? Is the Sky Serpent real or is it just a myth? Let me know in the comments below. Now that you're an expert on the Sky Serpent, test your knowledge by taking this quiz.